There is a special ceremony reserved for the beginning of American wars. It usually begins with concern, continues with briefings, and ends with missiles. This time, the sermon arrived under the banner of Operation Epic Fury, a campaign that opened with thousands of strikes, the death of Iran's supreme leader, and the bombing of a girls' school in Menab. All of it explained carefully as necessary for stability. On Second Take, we examine how modern wars are introduced to the public through language, through certainty, and through the curious belief that the country dropping the bombs is simply maintaining order. Welcome to a story where missiles travel faster than diplomacy and explanations arrive even faster. This is Second Take. There is something almost religious about the way the United States begins wars, not the war itself. War is chaotic, loud, and full of frightened people making decisions they never expected to make. No, the American version of war must first pass through a ceremony. It must be narrated, it must be explained, it must be wrapped carefully in the language of reluctant responsibility before the missiles begin doing their very enthusiastic work. And so, on February 28, the world witnessed the opening act of another sermon in Washington's long-running Church of Strategic Salvation. According to the U.S. military timeline reported by Reuters, President Donald Trump gave the final order on February 27, with the coordinated strike wave by the United States and Israel beginning on February 28. This was not an accident. It was not a border skirmish that escalated overnight. It was a planned campaign involving airstrikes, cyber operations, and space-based disruption designed to disable Iran's ability to detect and respond. Modern warfare has developed a wonderfully polite vocabulary for doing extremely violent things. Cyber and space operations sounds like a panel discussion at a technology conference. In reality, it means the attacking power switched off the defender's lights before arriving with explosives. The timing of the operation, however, is where the story begins to look less like urgent defense and more like geopolitical impatience. Just 2 days before the strikes, US-Iran nuclear talks in Geneva ended without a breakthrough, yet Oman said progress had been made. Progress in diplomacy is a fragile thing. It requires patience, it requires the absence of explosions, and unfortunately, patience has never been the most fashionable virtue in modern great power politics. Progress does not produce headlines. Missiles do. Then there is the intelligence contradiction, one of those awkward facts that tends to hover in the background while governments speak confidently in front of cameras. Reuters reported on February 25 that the U.S. intelligence community's 2025 assessment still held that Iran was not building a nuclear weapon and that Ayatollah Ali Khamenei had not reauthorized the nuclear weapons program suspended in 2003. This creates the strange spectacle of a war launched partly over a nuclear weapon that the launching country's own intelligence services believed was not currently being built. But political urgency often outruns intelligence caution. Trump publicly argued Iran was very close to obtaining a nuclear weapon, and when urgency and restraint collide in Washington, urgency tends to board the aircraft carrier first. That's just the way it is. So, the Pentagon announced the campaign under the name Operation Epic Fury. Names matter in war. They reveal the psychology of the people choosing them. No military operation is ever called Operation Mild Disagreement or Mission Calm Clarification. Epic Fury, on the other hand, sounds less like a strategic military campaign and more like a video game expansion pack. The official goal was to destroy Iran's offensive missiles, missile production capabilities, and naval forces while preventing it from obtaining a nuclear weapon. But then the rhetoric widened dramatically. Trump said the United States should have a role in choosing Iran's next leader. At that moment, The mission quietly expanded from neutralizing weapons to redesigning a country's political future. Regime change has a curious way of entering American wars like an uninvited guest who insists he was expected. The scale of the campaign quickly demonstrated that this was no symbolic strike. Reuters reports that more than 2,000 targets have been struck across Iran and that over 30 Iranian ships have been destroyed. The International Atomic Energy Agency said entrance structures at Iran's underground Natanz enrichment facility were damaged, though it confirmed no radiological consequences from that specific damage. In modern warfare, this counts as reassuring news. Yes, a nuclear-linked site was bombed, but the radiation politely declined to participate. Then came the moment that turned the confrontation into full war. Ayatollah Ali Khamenei was killed during the opening wave of US-Israeli strikes, with Iranian state media confirming his death. When the leader of a country is killed on the first day of attacks, the phrase limited operation begins to sound like describing a hurricane as slightly windy. But the most haunting image of the opening day was not a naval strike or a missile factory. It was a school. In the southern Iranian city of Minab, a girls' elementary school was bombed during the first day of the war. Reports emerging afterward indicated that the strike was carried out by the US-Israeli attack campaign, killing large numbers of students and civilians inside the school. The attack on the girls' school quickly became one of the most shocking symbols of the opening assault, because when a war's first headlines include the bombing of a school of children, the language of precision and necessity begins to sound disturbingly hollow. Schools are among the clearest civilian sites protected under international humanitarian law. They are places where the future of a society is supposed to be built quietly with books and chalkboards rather than explosives. Yet within hours of the war beginning, the world was confronted with images of classrooms turned into rubble and school bags scattered among the debris. The tragedy in Minab exposed one of the central hypocrisies of modern warfare. The same powers that frequently present themselves as defenders of education, children, and women's rights had launched a military campaign whose first day included the destruction of a girls' school. This is the uncomfortable reality of modern war. The speeches about protecting civilians often arrive from the same capitals that authorized the bombs falling on them. If such an attack had been carried out by a country considered an enemy of the West, the condemnation would have been immediate and thunderous. It would have been called barbaric, criminal, and an attack on humanity itself. But when Western powers are involved, the vocabulary often becomes softer. The words incident and investigation appear quickly, as if tragedy becomes more polite when it passes through official review. And so the opening chapter of this war unfolded with striking clarity. The United States and Israel launched coordinated attacks on Iran after stalled but ongoing diplomatic negotiations. The country's supreme leader was killed in the first wave. More than 2,000 targets were struck. Naval forces were destroyed. Nuclear facilities were damaged. And the girls' school in Minab became one of the earliest civilian tragedies of the conflict. Yet the same governments responsible for the strikes continue to describe the operation as necessary to preserve peace and stability. This is one of the enduring paradoxes of modern geopolitics. The country with the largest military machine in human history often presents itself as the reluctant guardian of global order. Washington speaks about war the way a man holding a flamethrower talks about fire safety. It is not that the United States believes its wars are aggressive. It believes its wars are responsible. And responsibility, as history repeatedly shows, is a remarkably flexible word when you are the one dropping the bombs. Once the bombs begin falling, the second battle begins. The battle for language. No government ever admits it has started a war. Instead, it explains that it has managed a threat, neutralized a capability, or taken preventative action. And so the campaign against Iran entered the official record under the name Operation Epic Fury. A title that sounds less like a grave geopolitical decision and more like a video game expansion pack, as I said. The Pentagon says the aim of the operation is to destroy Iran's offensive missiles, missile production infrastructure, and naval forces while preventing the country from obtaining a nuclear weapon. But when a campaign has already struck over 2,000 targets, destroyed more than 30 ships, and killed the leader of the country in the opening strikes, the phrase limited operation begins to stretch credibility. The contradiction became clearer when Donald Trump suggested the United States should have a role in choosing Iran's next leader. At that point, the narrative quietly shifted from neutralizing weapons to redesigning a country's political future. Regime change, however, is a phrase Washington prefers to avoid these days. It tends to remind people of, Iraq, Libya, and Afghanistan, places where regime change arrived confidently and left awkwardly. Legally, the justification for the war is heavily debated. Under the UN Charter, states are generally prohibited from using force against another state unless it is authorized by the Security Council or carried out in self-defense after an armed attack. Reuters reports many legal experts believe those conditions do not clearly apply here. Washington and Israel framed the strikes as preventive or preemptive self-defense, yet international law generally allows that argument only when an attack is imminent and overwhelming, not hypothetical. This becomes even more complicated when the US intelligence community had assessed that Iran was not building a nuclear weapon. The war quickly spread beyond Iran. Iranian retaliation struck Israel and US-aligned states hosting American forces, with reports of impacts on ports, cities, and oil facilities in Gulf states. The Gulf Cooperation Council invoked Article 51 of the UN Charter, signaling readiness for collective self-defense. Since the conflict began, multiple vessels have been attacked, and a strike in Kuwait reportedly killed 6 US service members. Civilian casualties have been reported in Israel, Lebanon, Bahrain, Kuwait, Oman, the UAE, Syria, and Iraq. Like most modern wars, the conflict expanded beyond the neat strategic diagrams presented at press briefings. And yet, Washington continues to frame its actions as defending the rules-based international order. This is where the irony becomes difficult to ignore. The same country that frequently lectures the world about unilateral military action has launched a preventive war that many legal experts say sits on shaky legal ground. In international politics, the rules often appear strict until the most powerful players decide they are flexible. The result is a familiar pattern. The United States launches a strike, explains that it was necessary to preserve stability, and then watches as instability spreads across the region. That is the quiet paradox of epic fury. In the name of preventing chaos, a war has begun that may produce far more of it. And to help me sift through the rubble, for lack of better terms, shortly I'll be joined by journalist Algeto Greg. As promised, I am now joined by journalist Algeto Greg, and we are trying to make sense of what is happening with regards to US, Israel, and Iran. Thank you for joining us, Algeto.
Thank you very much, Ashwin. Yeah.
Where to start? You know what, let's start at the beginning.
I think we should start with the name, Epic Fury.
Epic Fury.
Yeah, you see, that is a little bit confusing for me because it's the name that the US gave to their operation. But what are they angry about? What epic fury are they talking about? In terms of Israel's relationship to Iran, you could understand that there might be some epic fury because there's been animosity for generations.
Yes.
So that could explain it. But that's not Israel's name.
Yes.
For this war.
This is America's.
That's America's name.
Yes.
So already we are seeing confusion. We are seeing a lack of clarity, and I think that leads me to the next thing that I'd like to draw our attention to, which is that this war accentuates and punctuates what we've begun seeing with the situation in Gaza, which is that we are now in a world of disinformation, misinformation, weaponized lies. And it's so difficult to know what to believe, who to believe.
Absolutely.
Even somebody who is convinced that what they are telling you is true, their sources could be questionable. So your sources could be questionable, even if they have the best of intentions, because now it is very difficult to get to the truth. I think that we should all bear that in mind all the time. And for any item of information that you consume, I think it should become second nature to question it, to find other sources, either to verify or to provide nuance, because all information is now suspect. That's the
Yes.
world we are living in.
Indeed, I have to agree. And, you know, it's not just the information, it's the timing of the information.
Yes.
Because if you're in America, you know that the headlines have been dominated by the Epstein files.
Yes.
And you know that currently they are not. Now, I saw a conspiracy theory on Twitter, and it did make me curious. Some people who were questioning Epic Fury realized, at least according to their own opinions, that if you search Donald Trump EP and it was previously automatically showing Epstein,
Yeah.
it's more likely now it will show Epic Fury. That's
Even
the algorithms. That's the conspiracy theory. But
another example is that right in the beginning of this war, there was a strike on a school in Iran, a girls' school, primary
Minab
school.
school, yes.
And there was a photo of the graves that were dug for those little girls that have died. And the veracity of that photo was questioned on Western mainstream media. And fact checkers went to go and find that no, the photo is legitimate.
wow.
So even some truth gets questioned
Yes.
by the media and by social media, just in general, which
Yes.
means that each one of us should be very careful, you know,
Yes.
to vet for ourselves
Definitely.
any information that we consume and form opinions based on.
And we have to, you know, in life, a lot of people would like to gaslight you when you have a conversation where they say they're just bringing up something just to bring it up.
Yes.
You have to ask why the focus is
Why?
the picture when we know for sure over 150 girls died.
Yes,
Why is that the focus? Why are you giving us an entire breakdown of whether or not this picture is real when we know that the situation itself is real, the facts are on the ground? And that's the word distraction comes back into play. And we are talking about the masters of distraction. And I don't even need to mean this negatively. Hollywood exists.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean? These are people who understand, and perhaps no one, and I could argue this, and it's not a compliment, it's just a fact. No one knows how to manipulate the algorithm better than Donald Trump. He understands that in its entirety. In fact, it might be the only thing he understands, because he knows when he says words, they're not just words, they are headlines.
Yeah.
And the people who do align with him are more than happy to follow with agenda. Yes, it's looking shaky if you're looking at the upcoming primaries, which are going to be happening in the US in April. Why is it shaky? Because Donald Trump explicitly said he would not attack Iran, that he would not go to war, and thus some people are becoming disillusioned.
Yeah.
However, as you're saying, your disillusionment is your own responsibility.
Yes, you need to inform yourself. But I'd like us to shift our conversation to what this means for us here in Namibia. From right in the beginning of the conflict, there was already this interruption of the shipping of oil. And we, as a small open economy, we import almost everything, not least all of our fuel. And that fuel has an impact on the prices of almost all goods,
Everything.
almost all services, everything. So we are very lucky because the war started on Saturday, but on Friday, our Ministry of Mines and Energy had already announced that fuel prices stay the same for this month of March. And even though that announcement was withdrawn on the Saturday, it was put back as is on the Sunday.
All right.
So by Monday, we had that assurance that for now, our fuel prices stay the same. It is possible that the situation escalates to the point where our ministry, our government might decide that intervention is necessary, because we do everything to ensure that the fluctuations in fuel prices are systematic and steady, not huge jumps suddenly.
Yeah.
So it will be better if it is necessary to increase fuel prices that to do a small increase sooner rather than waiting for a big increase later.
Yes.
So that possibility still exists.
Definitely.
Experts do say that we can prepare ourselves. It's going to hit us eventually. Fuel prices will go up, which means cost of living will go up, which is a major issue for us being a rich country full of poor people. The majority of our people are very vulnerable to cost of living increases. So there's that impact that we can expect. In fact, I know that on Wednesday morning, when I was covering Anti-Corruption Commission event where the Prime Minister attended, he had to leave early to go to State House because there was a high-level discussion being held there regarding the situation developing in Iran. We haven't heard anything official from State House, so I don't think any of their decisions can be or they've decided to inform us about any of their decisions. But we are keeping a close eye on that. And I would just like to slip in there that Namibians should appreciate our media. Because our media, although we are not perfect, mistakes do happen and they creep in. There's no massive conspiracy to feed us lies. Our media, whether it's state or independent, they are doing their best to inform us to the best of their ability. So at least from a Namibian perspective and about what's happening in Namibia, you can believe most of what is said, bearing in mind that mistakes do happen and there are often different points of view. You should consume media from different sources to better inform yourself. But at least here, we know that nobody's actively trying to lie to us, which is not the case
elsewhere.
Internationally.
For sure. And just a little context for our viewers. This comes down, particularly talking back to the oil and fuel, to the Strait of Hormuz, which channels 1/5 of the world's oil. And that's obviously going to affect a multitude of countries. I'm not entirely sure of precisely where Namibia imports from.
We did find out, and a story was published earlier this week. We do import fuel from that region, but we also have various other sources, including China, America, Europe, and even some sources within Africa, specifically Nigeria. And I think Libya was there.
Libya.
Yes.
All right.
So
Okay.
we have diversified sources.
Yes.
And on top of that, a shipment of fuel was heading our way on Wednesday. These things take a few weeks to come, so it's probably still heading at the moment. And according to NAMCOR, the National Oil Storage Facility has 3 months of storage full at the moment. We're not expecting a shortage. Yes, but we are expecting an increase in price.
All right. And perhaps, like you said, there's a lot of high-level strategic meetings being had. We do know right now, I was having a look at Reuters, that Nigeria, Angola, Ghana are expected to make some significant revenue because of this. It's not the kind of way that you want to get, positive revenue, but what is positive with that is it might encourage some alignment with more African countries with regards to these dispensaries. If I'm not mistaken, Nigeria makes 1.5 million barrels a day. So we'll see how all of this unfolds, and it is good. Look, I have to say, Namibia is very pragmatic, and looking at the budget speech which was delivered by Honorable Erika Shafuda, prudence is a big part of what we're trying to do here, without a doubt. Now, swinging back to Iran, Israel, and the USA. Several people have been arrested, alleged to be Mossad agents. This is in Saudi Arabia and other Gulf states. And they were arrested because they were believed to be expected to bomb places in Saudi Arabia to foster the perception that it was Iran doing this. Is this about Iran, or is this about destabilizing the entire region and Israel being the only one with nuclear weapons?
I think it's definitely about destabilizing the region, because already reports have come out of millions of US dollars being made by the Trump family and people who are high up in the American government. We also know that in Israel, there is a lot of money being made right now. So people are profiting, especially, the world has now become the playground of the mega rich. And those mega rich people, they know ahead of time because they have insider sources. They do a lot of insider trading. So there's no morality really. The morality is left for those of us who are struggling to survive. Those of us who have plenty and more than enough, they are not bothered by what's right or wrong. They are bothered by what increases what's in the pocket.
Yeah.
And a lot of money is being made from this instability. And we are left to pay the bill.
Let's talk about that morality.
Yes.
Because there's a religious tone to this. And it's getting weird,
Yes.
for lack of better terms.
Yes,
In America, an army commander literally telling the troops that Donald Trump was sent by Jesus to kickstart Armageddon. Of course, that's going to land softly on a country that naturally assumes that Islam as a whole is a violent religion.
Yes.
150 girls dead included.
Yeah.
And then on the other side, there's Christians who feel that the Israel, which was established in 1948 by the Rothschilds, happens to be the same one from the Bible.
Yes.
Which would be interesting, because if it is the same one from the Bible, quite central to their belief system is that they do not believe that Jesus is the Savior.
Yes.
It's getting mixed up. It's
Very
getting
much,
weird.
very
The
much.
agendas are flowing from everywhere. Surely, and I've always maintained that a large amount of the religions which are practiced are created for peace, love, humanity. And all of them, without exception, have extremists who will pervert what that means.
Yes,
We know of Al-Qaeda, and we also know of Epic Fury.
Yes.
And I can say Epic Fury does not go with religious practices, because if you look at the life of Jesus, it is pretty clear where he stands. Pretty sure the guy who said, forgive your neighbor 77 times 7 times, and said, bring all the children unto me, is not a big fan of what's going over here, if your Christianity is based on Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
How do we navigate such a space? Because it's moral. It feels like the attacks are coming from everywhere.
Yeah, I think
And all of them are designed to divide us.
I think it's important to firstly remember the past and also to separate your faith from religion. Religion is the organization of faith, sometimes for the manipulation of that faith for personal or human
Africans who know about that.
You know, in Namibia, we experienced apartheid, and in apartheid, during that time, the Afrikaans Bible justified apartheid. So our Christianity was used to justify the segregation and the degradation,
Subjugation.
of people. And so we are not unfamiliar with the misuse of religion. Still, our faith is strong, and Namibia is still a Christian country. We still have Christian values which dominate our society. And those values also demand that we cannot be antagonistic against people of other faiths, because our Christianity says that we must love our brothers and our sisters.
And we're still a secular nation.
Yes, and we are a secular nation. There's a division. So just be aware that people try to misuse your faith and your religion for their own purposes, and it's happening again. And that will protect you, because if you stick to the principles, the foundations of what you believe, you can be guided to see when it is truly from God and when it is from man.
I make a living giving second takes. That does not need one. Thank you for joining us, Ogeta.
Thank you very much.
That's been the show.